Good morning, this is Kim Hammer with your devotion taken from the book of Judges chapter 9. We find that Gideon has died, and after his death we find the nation of Israel actually turned against Gideon's family. They had forgotten all the things that Gideon had done for them, how he had delivered them from the hands of the Midianites and had given them a land of peace and had given them prosperity in the land. And instead we find that the inhabitants of the land turned against his 70 sons and their wives, and against his concubine and against her son. And we find that as time goes on, that they treated them cruelly. Now one son, Abimelech, who was the son of Gideon's concubine, devised in his mind that he wanted to be the leader. And so he went to some of the folks in his family, because remember, his mama was a Shechem. And so he was in the bloodline of the family that Israel had dominated over. And as a result of it, he went to some of the men of the city and he said, wouldn't it be better to have one of your brothers rule over you than these 70 others who are not of our bloodline? And he began to work the crowd up, and they agreed. And as a result, they gave him money. And with that money, the Bible tells us that he bought the loyalty of 70 rebel rousers who were going to go in and stir things up in the city in order to instigate a riot against the 70 sons of Gideon and their wives. And he was successful. And we find that he took the 70 sons and he took them to a rock and he slayed them one by one in order to remove them from his presence. This would give him open reign to the city of Shechem. But as all this was going on, one of the sons, the youngest one, escaped. And we find that he went up to a rock on the top of the city where he could have a commanding voice in order to give a message to the city. And this was the youngest son, Jotham. And Jotham said to them, and he gave them a parable. He said, the olive tree was asked if he would rule over the city. He said, why should I quit pressing my oil in order to bring pleasure to people? The fig tree said it wouldn't quit producing his sweet figs that people were enjoying. And the vine said it would not give up producing the grapes that made the wine for men and for gods. But finally there was one left, and it was the thorn bush. And the thorn bush said, if you really want me to be your king, then come take refuge in my leaves. In other words, they were going to go into a time of entrapment. And that's exactly what happened whenever it was that they put this man Abimelech under control to him, that as time would go on, and we would find 3 years later that it would be a snare to them, and that they would be defeated and they would be conquered because of who they chose to lead over them. There's an important message in this, and the important message is that we need to be careful in who we choose to place in leadership over us. If all the quality individuals have said no, it's better to have no leader than to have a leader that's going to lead you into bondage. That's exactly what happened to the nation of Israel. First of all, they got started off on the right foot, and that they didn't listen to God, and they didn't take care of God's man that had delivered them from where they were. Then they killed the family of the man that had given them the land that they had and had done so much for them, in order that they might replace them with a man that was after their own heart. A man who was not following God, but a man who had rebelled against God, and in his wicked ways he led that city also in a wicked way, to the point that finally 3 years later they realized the mistake that they had made, but it was too late. The message in the devotion this morning is, choose carefully who you follow, because they might be leading you into a thorn bush for your own personal destruction.